In the context of this conversation, one of the themes we've been investing in and continue to invest in is what we internally address as smart enterprise. We don't say AI or ML because you get confused between what's a platform versus what the application of the technology. It's just about what are the technology that CIOs, CTOs are using internally to get to help their constituencies be better, be faster. So that's really what this conversation is going to be about. I'd love to understand internally, starting with you, Adhir, what are some of the projects that you're looking at that are high priority for you, and how are you thinking about whether it's technologies like AI, ML, or just regular BI, or better utilization of your data, et cetera? Where's that intersection between your projects and these newer technologies?
Yeah, so I joined Marvell about 2 years back, and when I joined, one of the things we wanted to do was transform our internal business operations. So I know these words like transformation, and they sound very marketing kind of words. So the simple definition for us was, since we are an engineering company, our core competency and the need for us is to basically get the chips out of the door soon. So we wanted to ensure that our internal employees can do their day-to-day job, whether they are getting a request from IT or HR or facilities or finance, like quick and easy. It shouldn't take anybody days to figure out some of the non-essential things. So that was our idea behind the business operations. So in that respect, we have done quite a lot of work helping internal employees. Then the second thing for us was we wanted to ensure that folks around the world, because they're in different countries, different time zones, in many cases different languages, to ensure that we give them a better collaborative infrastructure, right? Video conferences, audio conferences, collaborative tools. They can work on things together. So right from day one, we said, okay, video first is going to be our strategy, right? So that's one area we have been really, really working quite a lot. And then the third area for us was that as a company, the goal is to continuously improve our operations. So getting access to the hidden data so that our leaders could make timely and smart decisions. So I know we call it analytics and machine learning and whatnot, but the business idea was get access to that data so that business can make timely decisions. So these were the three core areas where IT, our team has been working on helping our business get better.
That's interesting. So self-service, don't file a ServiceNow ticket, just get access to the service, and as long as it's within the bounds of some sandbox, you should be able to get it.
Exactly. I mean, I'll give you an example. So right after 3 months when I joined, one of the things we were looking at was, why am I having 5,000 ServiceNow tickets? And as we started digging into the data, we realized that out of those 5,000 tickets, I'm just making the numbers up because I won't give you the real numbers. For obvious reasons. So out of those 5,000 tickets, we had like 500 tickets just for resetting the password. So why would you do that? So instead of that, we said, okay, let's give you a self-reset password mechanism and go with it. So things like that. Right?
Makes sense. And then so self-service was one, better collaboration. So tools like video conferencing or Slack or variants thereof and so on.
Exactly.
And then third was data that's underwater today, that's just cold data. No one's taking advantage of it, being able to better utilize that data to make real-time decisions.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, I know many of us use those conferencing tools, and how difficult and how time-consuming and how frustrating it is when you go to a meeting and it's an hour meeting and 10 minutes it takes just to set it up, and everybody abuses and blames IT. I mean, rightfully so, I guess. But so our target was to ensure that whenever somebody enters a meeting, it should be less than a minute before meeting can get started. And more importantly, like I said before, we wanted to ensure that video first was our strategy. So you can see the happiness of the people's faces when somebody from Bangalore is logging in, or China is logging in, or somebody from East Coast is logging in. They can see each other's faces and they can talk more collaboratively. I think the whole experience is different.
Totally agree. Job, same question for you. In terms of internally, what are some of the priorities and how do they intersect with some of these newer technologies?
So putting on an architectural hat, I think that I would echo what Adhir was saying earlier. What fundamentally it comes down to these three things: consolidate, converge, and integrate. So I think it really comes down to those three things. do we have a bunch of systems like every other company? Most companies have multiple systems trying to do the same thing. So how do you try to figure out how do you consolidate that to less number of moving parts? Is a big focus area.
Yeah.
Integration is a big focus area, and the third thing I think that you mentioned earlier is about the self-service. So self-service on many fronts, right? Like there's going to be organizations that are sitting outside the business technology or IT organization that want to have access to a certain number of things. So how do you make that self-service happen? How do you make it, as frictionless as possible, but in a very secure way? Security is paramount at WorkDay because of the nature of the data we use. And so how do you provide that information, and how do you provide the ability for external users to be able to help themselves to data and do it in a way? So that's a big focus of how do you provide self-service, both on integration as well as on analytics. So
and on the integration side, are you looking at technologies like RPA or others to help you sort of with that?
Right. There's typical integration tools that we have. That's typical MuleSoft, very code-heavy tools. But there are a lot of newer technologies coming up, like Workado, which is a company that we invested in that is very much focused on trying to do a pure, point and click and drag and drop approach to integration that the business can do themselves. So right. I think that's been a focus area. But also analytics is a big area. Can you provide a set of core data that is secure, that's verifiable, and then have it available to the business so they can actually help themselves to that? So this is a big focus of what we're doing. We have our own analytics product, but the question would be, how do you make it available to the business so that they can help themselves without breaking any security rules? Right. So this is really a big focus area. Now, talking about RPA, that's another area that is of great interest. We are in the early stages of that, but the idea would be, how do you take very mundane human processes and completely automate it and make it repeatable, and removing a lot of error from the process. So this is another area that's important and we're looking at.
There was a theme that both of you had at the intersection of self-service and automation, so I want to make it very AI and ML specific. So there are technologies where there's still a human interaction with the system. Ticketing, filing tickets is a classic example of that, where something like NLP could potentially help.
Yes.
Actually, it could help on the BI side as well, derive better insights from the data you already have. Are there specific use cases where you're sort of looking at that last mile technologies, like whether it's NLP or unstructured data, crawling through that to get insights? Any specific things that are interesting for you? Both Adhir, for yourself and Shiv.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I like when you say architectural view. So that's very important and critical, because just for the sake of ML and these kind of things, you don't want to just slap things in, right? So in our case, we have a roadmap, and the roadmap is, first of all, get global centralized systems and processes in place. So once you have that in place, then go after process automation. And once you have that in place, now these things necessarily don't happen in that particular sequence, or sometimes you have to do things in parallel, but at the end of the day, that's what you want to have. And then get your data to some destination. So once you have that data, then you can do all sorts of things, whether you do descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, all those kind of things, right? So in our case, so that's the path we have taken. So we have the day I joined, we set this roadmap up, right? IT 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. So 2.0 is what I'm talking about. This is global, centralized, automation, get the stage set for IT 3.0 for us, which is then taking advantage in a much optimized fashion with this AI, machine learning, and these kind of things. Now, for this particular use case, we do have, without naming any vendor, so we do have a ticketing system, for example. So that, when I joined, you won't believe, we had like 4 different help desk systems. So now we have one single system. So we have processes in place. Now the next step for us is now, the things I described, we are now able to diagnose what is going on, do a root cause. I talked about self-service password resets. So the next step now for us is, okay, now we can look at virtual agents. We can look at RPA kind of technologies. In fact, we are working with one of the local vendors here. We are going to invite this vendor and look at bots. The first time I talked about bots, everybody's like, what the heck is a bot? So at the end of this month, we are conducting a botathon where we are inviting folks from different businesses of our company and kind of educating them what can be done. So the moment you tell somebody that, okay, if you are logging into system X, downloading something, logging into system Y, uploading something, cutting and pasting, spending like hour and 30 minutes on this mechanical, repetitive, non-value added process, bots can do that in less than a minute. So once you have that concept, people get interested. So I think these kind of technologies definitely make sense, but that there has to be a use case. Right?
Job, how about yourself?
No, I just totally agree with that. I think that there's an explosion of bots. I mean, every single application or every single vendor is now providing various kinds of bots. Now there's going to be a little bit of a confusion as to which bot you're going to talk to. So there is a hierarchy. So there is a concept of hierarchy of bots, and there's an Uber bot sitting on top. So question is, how do you? This is like search. I mean, you have federated search. You have the same problem with bots. How do you deal with the fact that every application is going to have its own bot? Then the question would be, how do you try to triangulate this when a user is trying to talk to and get an information or an answer?
That's such a great point. I actually never thought about that, but you're right. If every application has its own bot, which
every application is now forced to have its own bot because it's so popular. But at the same time, from a user perspective, it would still create a user problem. But very simple things, and I agree with Adhir, simple things like if you can open a ticket by just talking to a messaging system like Slack or even a voice NLP you mentioned, that would make it a lot easier if somebody can say, get me a pencil, and then that would actually translate itself into something as a ticket in ServiceNow and flow through the system and come back to you as a pencil. That would be great, instead of having go through. So that getting to that level of simplicity is I think the beauty of making it work.
Right.
But if you don't do it properly, you will just have a mass confusion on the user's part as to how do you get it. So simplicity is very important. So in these cases.
So I know we can speak on bots for half an hour, but just one quick thing. So I think this is where we were like maybe 5 to 6, maybe 8 years ago in terms of reporting tools, right? So every ERP, every application came up with their own dashboard, their own analytics, and eventually companies decided that, okay, we need to have a centralized data warehouse somewhere and that kind of stuff. So I think similarly in bots, every application, we are looking at invoice automation, robotic process automation for invoice processing, right? So then, actually we are a WorkDay customer, and I know WorkDay is also getting pretty big time in the bots area. So then, do I want to have bots per application, or should I go and buy a bot platform that these companies can then integrate into, and then there is a centralized hierarchy of bots and somebody can control these bots properly.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting.
It's interesting to get a view on, when as a startup you write to a CIO, why they don't respond right away. Because it's like, dude, how do I even sort of understand what I should invest in? I want to turn the lens outside a little bit. So not in terms of how you're serving your internal constituencies, but this time, Job, starting with you, just your view on as WorkDay or as an enterprise applications company, what excites you about AI or ML in terms of your ability to better serve your customers? And then the same question, Adhir, for you as well.
So, I mean, I'm going to talk in general, I mean, not necessarily about WorkDay, but in general, I think from an application perspective, a lot of the information that is required to make better decisions are already in your application. Now, the question is, how do you take that data, cleanse it, make it good, feed it into a model, which is fundamentally a machine learning model that can learn from it, define the patterns, and then predict something.
Right.
Now, the prediction may all be related to various things like retention of customers, or so there's so many different kinds of predictions you can do. And if you look at various applications out there in the CRM space or in the HR space and in financial space, is always trying to do this aspect of get good data, feed a model that can be used now to predict something in the future, and then keep that model updated all the time as your data changes.
Right.
So this is the same sequence that all the companies are going through, and WorkDay is no exception. So at the end of the day, I think that once you have the core data, you can use the data to fundamentally learn from and predict something.
Yeah, this is a theme we hear a
theme.
lot on the venture side as well, both not just from startups, but from CIOs like yourself, and that don't make me do the work.
Right.
Just give me the insight. Just surface it. You have the data.
Yeah.
Just tell me what's changing, what's interesting.
So the key is the data itself.
Yeah.
Right. I think this is what Adhir was saying too. If you have bad data, you'll get bad predictions.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you gain confidence in that data and keep it cleansed so that when you feed the machine learning model, that it's actually using good data.
Right.
And once you do that, then you can build various kinds of propensity and prediction models from
Right.
it.
Adhir, how about Marvell? How are you thinking about this space?
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting question. So I don't think I'm going to tell you, because you already know how much of data explosion is out there. Everybody's carrying mobile devices, phones, and then sometimes you look at your phone, it says 5G LTE, which by the way is not really 5G. But it's coming. So you have all these IoTs, you have those automobiles with all sorts of sensors built in. So the point is now, Marvell is also in this automotive space. So our chips are used in some of these cars. So we are very familiar. In fact, we call these automotives as data center on the wheels. We are looking at these as data centers. Because if you think about it, there's a CPU, there is a network, there's a storage, it's like a data center, right? So what is happening is, with the advent of 5G and all these AI and ML kind of activities happening and getting close to the edge, because that's where you need it these days. So at Marvell, that's where we are playing. So 5G, ML, AI at the edge. So at this point in time, Marvell has the most comprehensive product portfolio to satisfy these requirements. Now, with that said, question is, how is IT helping? So when a company like us develops these kind of products, there are certain interesting things that happen. So we get into these new semiconductor technologies, 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, and believe me, the amount of data that is required to design these products and the amount of compute that is required to design and develop these products is humongous. So that's where we in IT work very closely with our engineering teams to get things done. Now, in terms of companies like us, we're not just selling chips anymore, we are selling solutions. So solution means the whole software, firmware, utilities, drivers, everything else. So with that, more recently has come into this, besides doing hardware development, we're also getting more and more into this software development. So for IT, we kind of know how to do software for IT, like ERP. That's pretty straightforward. We have done this for ages. But when you do that for engineering, it's slightly different. So that's where more and more of very sophisticated DevOps come into picture. How to ensure that the software and drivers and utilities that go along with our solution are of high quality. So that's where our IT team plays pretty critical role.
Great. I'm going to move into a section that I gave both of you no warning on. So this is the part where I have fun. So I call this rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you just maybe 3 or 4 questions, and I want to get your blink reaction to these things. So they're easy questions. They're not trick questions. I promise you. And we'll start with you, Joe, but then we'll go to others. So what keeps you up at night right now?
I think trying to make sure that that I am staying on top of all the technological changes going on probably keeps me at night.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Or somebody actually asked the question. The question is not about what keeps you at night. Is what wakes you up in the morning.
Yeah, that's a great way of asking the same question.
That's what wakes me up in the morning.
Yeah. How about you, Adhir?
It's cybersecurity. Because for us, IP protection is very, very critical. I don't need to tell you all the geopolitical situation out there. So for us, IP protection is the most critical part. In fact, I spend a lot of my time on that particular area. You won't believe I spent more than 50% of my time on the cybersecurity.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Just without sharing any numbers, has your spend on cybersecurity across both companies, do you feel has it gone up over the last, as a percentage of overall technology spend, has it gone up over the last few years?
Absolutely,
or
absolutely.
Flattish? Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it depends.
Multiple times.
It depends a great deal on the architecture of what you have internally,
right,
and how much security. So the question is that if you have a very big focus on the perimeter security, and that's what you're depending on, then that will wake you up at night all the time, right? Because there's always somebody's going to penetrate that. But moving the security down to the application and the object level and keeping it very tightly will actually change your view on security. From that perspective, I think that some of the newer software development companies are very focused on bringing the security down all the way down to the object level, as opposed to focusing very much on perimeter. So,
Yeah, there's
so it's
a lot
not so
of,
much of an issue for
yeah.
us, but I'm sure it is for many companies.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of innovation in that space as well. I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience that you made very happy with that comment just now. Okay, second question. The one vendor marketing term you just really hate.
Oh, that's a question for me?
Yeah.
Have you thought of your cloud strategy? Give me a break.
I love it. How about you, Joe?
I think that I have hard time when people constantly keep saying that what is being offered is really, really going to reduce your cost. And it never does.
You
in
should
some
talk to
cases
some of my
it
portfolio
does.
firms,
Yeah.
you know?
Some of them do, but the reality is that, when you compute the cost of anything, any program, being able to fully understand the total cost of that particular project implementation or a product.
Cost to change, people
The
that you
total cost is never really understood. It's always been the entry-level cost that's been, so I really have a hard time believing when people say that it's going to cost you less.
Okay. All right, next question. Actually, this is a fair question. So outside of your two respective companies, which company in your peer group do you feel has really used IT as a good strategic advantage? That you internally is like, we need to more like what those folks over there are doing. Job, starting with you this time.
I'd like to say us.
That's why I ruled that out.
I have a similar response.
Of course.
I don't think there's anybody better.
Yeah, it would. That's a hard question to answer. I mean, I don't know really. Having worked in many of the companies in the Bay Area, I would actually be hard pressed to say which one is better than the other. I mean, they all have their strong points and weak points. Yeah.
Well, so this is where I have to say something.
Sure.
I think it's very hard to compare whose IT is better. You probably can compare companies in general based on the public data for some other metrics like your revenue growth or your operating margins and gross margins and maybe your days of inventory and things like that. But for IT, there's no publicly available information. I can say anything and Joe can say anything and who knows, right? So I wish there were some publicly available metrics that companies were supposed to be putting out there, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I think until that happens, we are the best.
And on that note, I want to thank you for your time. I would have loved to take questions, but we want to keep things running on time. Job and Adhir, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I know you have busy lives. You were both on the phones constantly as I was walking you over. So thank you for making the time.
No, thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.